Welcome to Baseball Biz on Deck. I am Mark Corbett, and I am here today with Mr. Matt Germain. My gosh, I'm glad when he's here every week. Hey, Matt, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, Mark, and I'm shining like 50, basically.
50. Are you 50 years old? Is that what you're saying?
I'm almost 50. I'm up 48. A spry 48 is what I would call
Now, there's another 50 you're talking about for today, though.
it. That's right. So we're
And
going to go through the top 50 Rays prospects today, and I think we can all agree that the Rays system is getting a lot of praise around ML this offseason.
yeah, over years, the farm system's gotten a lot of accolades. Briefly before we started talking today was with Matt. I was mentioning that show we did with Phil Coffin, which will be coming up soon, on on whatever the 572 cards from the 1959 Topps season, and he gives an essay on each one of them. And then I was telling him about you. I said, "Hey, I know a guy who does a lot of in-depth looking at things." I said, "And Matt Germain," I said, "This guy," I said, "he digs deep," and I explained how deep. And this 50 prospects list, and he goes, "Wow." I said, "Right, wow." So, Matt, can you remind folks about how you where you first dipped your toe into the water and what all you've done since you've been working with baseball sports?
Sure. Yeah, I started in the 2000s, the same way as a lot of people started, which is just getting to know fantasy baseball and following the game that way and connecting things along the way and making some contacts and getting to the point where I was actually running a blog and interviewing players for the Toronto Blue Jays at the time. And then eventually that grew into getting into deeper and deeper and deeper leagues and eventually into dynasty baseball. And anybody that's played dynasty fantasy baseball, if you're in a 30 team league like I was and you're going 40 prospects deep, you're getting to know a lot of the prospects along the way. When you're going that deep for 30 teams and you can do the easy math, that's 1,200 prospects that you have to cover. And, it's meticulous in some ways. Sometimes you'll focus on certain team systems because you know that they are doing a good job of scouting, and in other times you're going to actually focus on guys because you hear of them or they're posted on certain sites. But either way, you're doing the research, and that's always the way that I kind of looked at it. Because when I was working for FanSided and SBNation and writing about a lot of these prospects and making lists up, eventually, you have to throw material out there. And to throw material out there, you have to do the research. And to do the research, you have to dig into the details. And so along the way, I picked up some things that I kind of focused on and noticed and saw guys having success when they have certain tools and abilities. And I started watching more and more of the minor league games once they were available on MiLB.com and MiLB TV. So that's given me another avenue. I watch as many highlights as I can, and I really enjoy the whole process of it. And I think I just got addicted once I started doing that into actually making these lists, because I think, like I told you before the show, I think it's good to provide some hope to fans. And I think every fan, it starts the season, everybody is even in the standings, everybody has an equal chance, theoretically. And so what they want to know is what they should be looking for in season, why they should have hope. So you're kind of selling that story to them as to who's coming in each position. And for baseball, there's a lot of positions, there's a lot of roles. It's interesting to see how it all shakes out by the time the season's done.
Well, I want to congratulate you on doing an excellent job this year with all that work with the Tampa Bay Rays and coming up with the top 50 prospects for 2025. Because, man, it shows. I mean, you've been digging, you dug deep, you looked at these prospects, you looked at everything, just the simple things as their game, what's been their batting averages, how have they done, what's gone on with their pitching, how's their fielding, all of those sort of things. And from that, you were able to ascertain what you saw as the best, the top 50 prospects for the Tampa Bay Rays. And some of these guys, if y'all been listening to the show, we've talked about in the past, but Matt kind of gives you a bit more detail when he put this up on Blue Sky this past week. If you haven't checked it out, do so. And you can find Matt on Blue Sky at matgermain.bsky.social. So make sure you check that out. All right, Matt. Well, without further ado, then let's get started. What you got, buddy?
So at number 50, and I kind of want to start there because it paints a picture as to how good the list of players is. And the 50th guy on this list still has a chance to become a starter in the show. And it kind of alludes to, the quality of the pitchers that are off the list as well. They're kind of, it's just shocking in some ways because the Rays do have such a deep system. So Ben Peoples, he threw in Double-A last year, and he didn't throw the greatest of seasons, I think he would tell you overall, but he showed glimpses of being able to be a workhorse on the mound. And he's the type of guy that'll be able to get somewhere around 10 K per nine. He'll be able to give you a 4 ERA or 1.2 whip on average, depending on which way you want to focus on it. He's the kind of guy that has a pitch mix to stay in a starting role as long as possible to try to see if he can actually get enough swings and misses along the way as he gets a little bit higher and into AAA to see if that could work out for him. Now, we've seen with other guys that I would put in the same category as him, guys like Tommy Romero, that has come through in the past, or Kenny Rosenberg, where they've had to switch to relief role eventually to actually try to remain in the show. So Ben might take that kind of role, but he's still young enough. He's only 23, so there's a chance that he could stick on in that role after that. And so when we move up to 49, we get Jeremy Pilon, which is he's a Canadian guy. So I'm going to give the Canadian guys some props. But he's the kind of guy that, I actually watched some video of because I saw I follow a lot of the Canadian Baseball Network guys. And he was very highly promoted among their ranks as somebody to look for because he has a lot of deception. And so what I would say is he's using his left hand pitching side of things to his advantage. And I think that he's going to have a lot of deception. He's going to be a very raw talent that they have to mold into whatever it is that they can get out of him. And they're very good at doing that. So what I wanted to do is kind of see, okay, he pitched in rookie ball last year for the majority of it, but then they threw him up into A ball right before the season ended. And he just shone like a diamond. So that was kind of an eye opener where the work that they did in rookie ball was great. And he was able to actually put it into use at a time when the hitters were actually the hottest or most mature that they were going to be that season in A ball. So I think he's a guy that can move very quickly if they turn him into a full-time reliever. Still could be a starter. We'll see how it goes. He's so young that they can actually go either way. After him, you've got a monster. He's 6'8", Austin Vernon. A lot of the guys that I talk to on media outlets and on social media, they love this guy. He's just intimidating on the mound. He's a big guy, likes to get a lot of swings and misses high in the zone. Doesn't exploit the lower parts of the zone the same way as you would imagine a guy his size does, which is a little bit odd. Maybe that'll come eventually if he adds a pitch that gets him there. But for now, he's the kind of guy that you have to dream on a little bit because the results haven't been stellar when it comes to control. And for a guy his size, that makes a lot of sense. He's still young enough to actually get there. So those are the last three. So when you look at those three packages, you're noticing a trend, Mark, and that's that pitching is so abundant, from I would say from the 30th position through to the 50th, that you can make a case for any one of them to be ranked as high as 30 on this list.
And you do paint a pretty good picture here too. When I'm looking at what you've said on Blue Sky with this, talking about, let's see, the deception rates. To me, says, oh, I would love to see this guy pitch. That means he is confusing the pitcher about where that ball is going to be. He's able to place it where they don't think it's going to be. So those are important parts of the game. And I'm glad to see, since pitchers are such a large amount of the game, I'm not surprised to see you have so many of them here at that point.
Yeah, the interesting thing with it, and the reason that I point that out as well, is that since 2021, the Rays have been focusing on very early or at the top of the draft, getting the top end hitters that they can find or that they've scouted. And they're getting them with louder tools than they used to. So the Xavier Isaacs, the Carson Williams, all those guys. And they're doing the same thing. We just had the international market. The international market opened today. So the Rays announced a bunch of signings. And the majority of the top end guys that they signed were position players. They were not pitchers. And the reason being is that there's so much volatility in the pitching that the Rays are actually willing to bank on their development more than on the loud tools that they have in the draft, which can sometimes come back to bite you when you draft them so early. So it's an interesting thing anyway, but it continues. So at 47, we got Nate Knowles, who's a guy, he's the first draft guy that I mentioned here that they drafted just last year. And he's the kind of guy that can actually have a bit of a helium aspect, is what we would call it, is if he comes out swinging the first season that he's in the minors and actually does really well, you could hear his name in the top 30. That's how good his stuff actually is. It's just a matter of seeing it on the field and actually seeing him live. So all I've seen from him is videos and things that you see on Twitter of his college highlights. But I haven't seen him actually play in the minors. So it's a skeptical ranking of 47 saying, okay, we'll see how it goes this year. But the talent is definitely there. After him, we have Ty Cummings. He's the last piece in the Randy Arozarena trade. So he came from the Mariners system, and he has an easy, smooth delivery, is what I call it. It seems to like he's not even putting any effort into it. And I'm sure that's what the Rays were drooling about when they decided to bring him aboard, because they have a tendency of being able to get those kinds of guys to keep their blood pressure low in tense moments and actually shine and get a lot more out of them overall while keeping them in the zone. Some of the problem pitchers that the Rays have had over the years are the ones that they can't really zone in as much as they would like. So I think Ty fits that mold perfectly, and he should do really well in the Rays system. TJ Fontaine is a guy I had ranked 50th last year, and he's a lefty. I think there's a case to be made that he'll be switched into a starting role eventually if they need it, or if they have room for him, or if they think his ceiling there is really high. I just think that last year he was so pumped in the playoffs. He was doing great with the Biscuits. There's an outside chance that we see him in 2025. More than likely it would be 2026 though. 27 if they make him into a starter. Alexander Alberto. A lot of people thought he was going to get taken in the Rule 5, and he's another 6'8" guy. The Rays love those tall pitchers, and they want to bank on them actually getting a lot of intimidation and a lot of down working pitches, basically.
It's that release point, man.
Yeah, they like the north south, right? They really do. They kind of zoned in on that a few years ago. Yeah, it makes sense when your pitching coach is actually as tall as Kyle Snyder is. So, it's one of those things. So there you go. So from 44 all the way to 50, nothing but pitchers. And honestly, you can make a case for 44 being 50, 50 being 44. I like to group them in groups of 10, really, when you're looking at it, where the ceiling and the floor normally are very similar when you're looking at that kind of range.
It sounds like a good, strong future for the Rays in pitching. And it's like so many things with these guys being so young as prospects. I look forward to seeing them in a Rays uniform, but quite often I wonder if they'll wind up on another team before they make it to the bigs.
Right. Exactly. So at 43, we have JD Gonzalez, who's a catcher they got from the Padres in the Jason Adam deal. And to me, the Rays have to do that kind of thing in terms of bringing catchers in from other organizations, because they've had a hard time identifying catchers that can develop into really, really, really high. They've been okay with the medium side of things, like the
Right.
Luke Mileys, if you want to look back in time in terms of the guys that they brought in, like Nick Schufo, who probably had the skills to be a high-end catcher. He just never was able to put it all together. But JD Gonzalez represents a guy that has a great defensive makeup. So the big question with the Rays, and what they've had problems with in the past, but are having more success with now, is how far can they take his hitting abilities to make him into a more like number one catcher. So right now he's like halfway there, but there's signs that his defensive abilities are actually going to be high enough, and his leadership, that he could be envisioned as a high-end catcher at some point in time. So he'll be anchoring the lower parts of the Rays minor system behind the plate. After him at 42, we have Jack Lyons, another prospect that they just drafted. And to me, he's one of my favorite picks. And he's the reason why they were able to let another draft pick from that year kind of, they offered him a lot of money. He decided to walk. So a little bit of his extra bonus went to Jack Lyons. because the abilities that he has, if he had banked on himself going to college, he probably would have been a much higher draft pick than it was, which I think they selected him in the 12th round. I think he's more of a guy that you can look at as a potential steal in the draft if he actually puts it all together with the skill levels that he has. So his defensive abilities get a lot of praise. His hit tool shows a lot of promise, and because he's from Canada, there's always that thing about coming from the north. I think we've heard about it in the Rays system before with Garrett Whitley and other guys. When they come from the northern states or from Canada, because of the seasons and the lack of playing time, a lot of times that they get in some of the leagues that they grow up in, you expect a little bit of more raw abilities. Larry Walker was the same thing, where they had to basically mold him and teach him how to play baseball altogether. In his case, and he praises about it. He jokes about it. So that's Jack Lyons at 42. At 41, you got Keyshawn Askew. He's one of the guys that they got from the Mets, a left-hander. He's got a really funky delivery that's fun to watch. I was split on Keyshawn Askew. I didn't know exactly where I was going to put him. I had him for a while a little bit lower, had him for a while a little bit higher. He's one of those volatile arms that I think the control is going to always be an issue until he really figures out how to be repeatable with his delivery and release point. So he's got that kind of funkiness to him that you can see why he would be really effective in the show, but you can also see why he would hit hard. So it'll be interesting to see how he finishes it off, and how he actually, keeps plugging away in a system that's getting very loaded at the upper levels of Double A and Triple A when it comes to relief pitching. And that's basically how they've used him so far. So last year was a bit of a down year. He had much fewer K per nines as he got higher in the levels. So that's why the skepticism is there. TJ Nichols at 40 to finish off the 40 to 50 range. He's 22 years old. I think he'll, probably another 3 years in the minors. Really, really, really interesting guy. He finished the season extremely strong, never gave up more than 2 earned runs in over the last 9 outings that he put up. And in that time, I think he only walked 7 over 48 innings while striking out 43. So that kind of opens up your eyes in terms of what he's capable of. And now you're looking for more basically next year when he jumps up a level. And, A plus is always going to be a lot tougher for some of these guys that have a lot of success in A ball. But really the big test for him, I think, is going to be Double A and to keep getting that level of success there. 39, we got Gregory Barrios. Is a shortstop. He's defensive minded, and we knew that when the Rays acquired him. He's from Milwaukee's system. He did a lot better with Milwaukee than he's done with the Rays when it comes to being consistent offensively. But to his credit, the K rate has always been great, always under 15%. Doesn't show much power, but he's got, that kind of ability that you can see a utility role come into play where that he ends up in AAA because his defensive abilities are pretty solid, at various positions. You can say, okay, well, we can have him on the bench. He offers a little bit of speed. He's a guy that'll steal about 30 to 50 bases in the minor league season. So you can envision him being really useful off the bench. And the Rays have that all the way through the system, Mark. It's ridiculous when it comes to speed and ability to move around the infield. Like that combination is just, and you'll hear a few more names when we get up to the higher levels.
Let me pause here for just a second. I'm curious. I was surprised when I started taking a closer look at baseball a few years back at the number of pitchers that are on a roster. What's kind of the average number of pitchers on a roster?
So it depends at the level, and also you got to remember that some of these franchises are also used as rehab, franchises or affiliates where the rehab center will be there. So there's always going to be more pitchers. You're right. Than there will be position players. And in some cases, because they're working out so many of those pitchers, they'll also carry a lot more catchers. So a good example would be in AAA. I think last year at some point, the Rays had 5 catchers in Durham. And a lot of that has to do with being able to work out these guys and being able to have all the programs that they run, as they're doing the last parts of their rehabs and on the side or wherever it is that they're throwing, they need somebody to be able to guide them through things. And a lot of times, you need the extra the extra guys to receive, and you don't want to put an outfielder back there
No, no.
if you can avoid it, right? So yeah, so the roster makeups vary by affiliates based on the needs of that affiliate. Generally speaking, I think when you look at MLB, it's always going to be half and half. So AAA tries to lean that way as well, but maybe you'll have a few more pitchers than you do position players because of what I just said.
Gotcha.
Uh, yeah, that's just general terms.
Well, that's what I was looking for. So give us the rest, my friend. What else?
So we got Owen Wild at 38. He's one of my favorite, outliers, the one that nobody speaks of. I think he's one of the guys to keep a really, really, really close eye on because when you're as consistently in the zone and able to show command, well, from the time you step into the pros through the amount of innings that he has under his belt, that gets to be impressive. So last year he had a 2.52 ERA and a 3 FIP over his last 8 games started. And to me, that showed a lot in terms of what to expect next year. That was at the A plus level. So he deserves a spot in Double A, in my opinion. But whether or not they feel he's ready and can outshine the competition that'll be really heavy when they get to spring training remains to be seen. But I definitely think he's one of the guys that could jump up into the top 20 Rays prospects, mid-season, if not by end season. After him, we got 37, Bobby Seymour. You might see him in 2025.
Hmm.
Bobby gets no love. I don't understand why. The K rate to me, Bobby Seymour is a lot like Logan Morrison, right?
Yep.
He's just one of those guys that the defense won't shine. He'll always hit a lot of home runs and with a lot of power, and he'll always hit enough that you want him in the lineup. So why is that bad? I
Yeah.
look at his WRC plus or his weighted runs created. In 2021 it was 148. And you can look all the way through. It's always been consistently high, well above the average. And I think he got punished because they got him into the system at such a late age that he's always been a little bit older for his level. And it's not right for people to do that and to punish him for it. He did extremely well last year in AAA and in AA at an age that is fine for those levels. I mean, when you've got a weighted on base average of 405 in AAA, to me that shows that you can play. You can play that level. So they'll definitely start him in AAA next year. But if they need, for some reason, they need a bat to ignite something in the lineup, a lot like I was saying about Austin Shenton last year, like Bobby Seymour is ready to kind of get that shot and see what he can do. So that's Bobby Seymour at 37. 36, we got Tanner Murray. I think the reason he's there more than anything is because I watched the playoffs in Montgomery, and he was anchoring that lineup, and he was doing a great job at it. The at bats he was putting up were very, very mature and impressive. No poise under pressure. He can do a little bit of everything, and I think he's had so many nagging injuries along the way and odd playing time at different positions that he probably should have been playing on occasion, that he doesn't get as much love as some of the other guys might get. And so his K percentage is always going to be, or has been, solid. His weighted on base is usually pretty good as well. And I think he has the potential to take a lot of people by surprise. So even though I don't have him in the top 30, I wish I could fit him in. I think he could earn a role with the Rays before people expect him to. Jacob Matz is another guy that the Rays drafted last year. He's got a 4-pitch mix, really, really high floor. I like the pick. I think he's one of the guys that they got in the draft where you can really see some potential of being a starter. And they need as many of those guys as they can get because we know injuries happen. So it'll be interesting to see how he handles A-ball. I think he's going to be one of those guys they try to push along fairly quickly because he is a little bit more well equipped, I guess, to handle the lower parts of the minors and dominate while there. After him at 34, we got Mike Vassell. I was pushing for him to get taken by the Rays in the Rule 5, and they didn't actually take him, but they ended up trading for him. So it was one of those things that I kind of lucked out. I think the Rays will do a lot of good with him. I think they'll change the way that he approaches the pitch mix, and I like the size. I think he's going to be one of the guys to look for in AAA if he doesn't start with the Rays. I think there's a thing where he might have to be on the active roster when they start the season because of how
Hmm.
he was acquired. But we'll see how that goes and what they can work out depending on how he looks in spring. Logan Workman is next on the list at 33. I think a lot of people will be shocked because most of us expected Logan to be taken in the Rule 5 as well. And we're in that range now of the top 50 where guys can really, their next step is the show. It's not really, okay, how is he going to develop? Logan Workman is developed. I mean, you look at the amount of innings that he's thrown all the way through. 2024, he had 123 innings in Double A and 23 in Triple A. So you give him a half season in Triple A this coming year, and he would be more than ready to step into the show and give you some innings if you need them. How he ends up looking, we'll see. The reason he's not in the top 30 is basically because the batting average and balls in play is a little bit high.
Hmm.
And I think that's probably what scared off some teams for bringing him aboard and committing to him. Having said that, he's shown a really, really, really good knack for getting out of trouble and being close enough to the zone that he can get guys out when he needs to. And I think the results show that essentially. So you look at his ERA, it was 2.96, and his FIP is about 3.54. So he's overachieving based on the ERA, but the FIP is telling the story that he's more of a mid threes to four ERA kind of guy that you can expect. And the K per nine is about 10 with a walk rate of 2 consistently. So I think that kind of tells me a lot more information than to say, okay, is he going to actually shine when he gets into the show? It depends on what you think shine is. Is getting awkward hits here and there okay? Yeah. Is that better than giving up big home runs all the time? It depends. It depends on how many hits he gives up before. And I think Logan has that kind of ability of, like I said, getting himself out of trouble. So I like him. I didn't have Cole Wilcox in my top 50. That's one name that'll surprise people. And part of it was because of that, because I'm not sure he would be in a position to actually avoid as many bats as he could in the key moments. Um, he has to work a little bit harder. Nathan Fleming, another Canadian kid. So that's a third one already. A hard-nosed catcher. He's got a lot of people cheering him on that have seen him that just praise the makeup. Like they see this guy as the hardest worker on the team. They think that he's going to be a very special talent once he develops. I'm just looking forward to seeing what he can do at the lower parts of the levels. He's going to take a long time to develop. He's only 17 years old, and I think you're going to see him actually, he might have turned 18 in the offseason, but you're going to see him, develop slowly as catchers do, but always with a little level of intrigue because, like, along with JD Gonzalez, he represents two of the catching talents that they've brought in that you're kind of peeking at, going, there's interesting tools here. And part of him is that he was the second highest exit velocity among the drafted prospects this year. So
Wow.
112 miles per hour, he hit the
Dang.
that's that's a lot of power.
Yeah.
So the Rays love Mike Zunino, and he would be in that kind of mold when you're looking at that, kind of exit velocity as a 17-year-old.
Jesus
So
crackers, man.
you
Come
know
on.
what I mean? That's
Yeah.
intriguing.
Yeah, I'd say so. You got my
Yeah.
imagination going here because, like you were saying earlier, catching is one place where the Rays seem like they always need help. So I'm excited to see how this young man does.
Yep. He's yeah, and if you ever watch an interview with him, he's very, very poised and well grounded, I guess is the best way to put it. Matthew Etzel's the next guy on the list at 31. He's a very toolsy outfielder they got from the Orioles. I think I always see him as more of a Johnny Damon guy, but without as good of a hit tool as Johnny Damon had. He's got a lot of speed, can get on base. I think that he'll move around the outfield constantly. The only question is he going to actually develop enough power to earn a full-time role? It remains to be seen. I think he's only 22, so you have to give him a lot of leeway in terms of growing into the man body and say, okay, well, how does it develop, by the time he's 25?
Wow.
So, he's a guy that, along with the Rays system, when you look at it overall, I think he'll actually be one of the speedsters that takes the role over from Chandler Simpson in Double A because he stole 45 bases last year. So, like I said before, the Rays has so much speed in the system that it's really sickening. If you were to nickname the Rays system as a whole, it would be Roadrunners with a dash of power, right?
Yeah.
We're stepping into the top 30, Mark.
Boom.
So we got Trevor Martin at number 30. Trevor Martin was the darling of the first half of the season in the minors. He looked like super strong. Um, Through 122 innings overall. He has a good fastball and slider combination and really high strikeout rate. I think that the floor for Trevor Martin is very high. Um, he you try to look at the jump from A plus to Double A and not get too down on guys when they struggle a little bit.
Yeah.
So 2025 is going to be the season that he takes on, and I'm hoping we see him, tackle Double A with gusto. I think Shane Baz went through that a little bit where there was that little bit of a drop off in Double A when he initially got there, and then the next season started, and he just dominated from the get go. So we'll see how Trevor Martin handles it. I'm not expecting Shane Baz style levels, but anything above 10 K per nine and somewhere around 2.5 walks per nine will be fine. The Rays would take it. Because he has such a fastball slider combination, you can see him potentially going to the relief role as well. So I just throw that out there for him. Emilien Pitt is the next guy on the list at 29, the fourth Canadian on the top 50. I had to throw that out there because it's
All
really
right.
interesting. They drafted and acquired so much Canadian talent. But Emilien is a little bit different, where when they completed the draft and he went down to A ball and we got to see him play, he just had like really amazing at bats, really strong bat to ball abilities, and be able to work counts, not afraid to work deep in the counts, sprayed the ball around, made contact when he had to, just kind of was pesky, I guess, as in terms of a hitter right away, and never let that up as he was playing through the game. So that really kind of stood out to me when I was watching him play for the River Dogs. I think that, defensively, he's very solid. I think that he's going to move quickly, and I think that the floor is pretty high with him. So that's why he's in the top 30. And I think that he's going to get pushed really because the Rays are promoting so much of their infielders coming up in the next two seasons, that he's going to actually move fairly quickly through it. So I'm really interested to see what he's going to do. Having said that, once he gets to the upper levels, he's going to have to do a lot to beat the talent ahead of him. So that's why I have the ETA still held back a little bit as 2028.
Gotcha.
Uh, Duncan David is next, and I'm a big fan of Duncan's. I think that he doesn't get any notice whatsoever, and he doesn't give up a lot of home runs. He strikes out guys. He's a really good mound presence. It's just that he doesn't have that elite pitch that people go, wow, that's the pitch that I want to zone in on. But what I saw more than anything this year that just passed, was an ability to actually provide consistent innings in Double A. And that to me, like I said before with Trevor Martin, is a big sign. And he was able to grab it right away to the point where you're like, oh, okay, well, this guy's actually able to be one of the front runners in Double A, not just a back end guy in Double A. So we'll see how 2025 goes. I think that 2024 was more about adding innings, and he's jumped from 80 innings in 23 all the way up to 135 in 24. So that's a really healthy jump for a pitcher to take, and so there's no holding back innings. He's ready to go, and so with the fresh off season and some seasoning in Double A already, 50 innings under his belt there, I expect him to have a really strong season. So if he was able to find that extra pitch that gets him a little bit more swing and miss, he's a guy that could actually push for a call up at some point if he was needed. Trevor Harrison, probably one of the talents that people would point up to the most when you're talking about the lower parts of the system, as a pitching talent that could actually, become a front end starter. He's one of the guys that had one of the more dominant rookie or A-ball performances. I think that you're looking at the last 7 starts that he made there. There's 34 strikeouts in 32 innings, and he maintained a 2.78 ERA. So I think that he's ready to kind of tackle a little bit more. And like I said, with Duncan David, who added a lot of innings last year, for Trevor, this upcoming year is going to be more about adding innings and continuing to refine his 4 pitches that he uses on the mound. So really interested to see what this guy can do. He's only 19. There's no rush for him to move through the system at lightning speed. They're going to take their time with him. Mac Horvath, utility player. I think his ETA is coming up. 2026 is what I have. He's basically battling with Tanner Murray for that kind of utility role. And also Cooper Kinney, which I'll talk about a little bit later, and Curtis Mead. Those are the guys that I would say are kind of duking it out for bench roles or playing time at the upper levels.
I want to go ahead. I noticed that you say Mr. Horvath here is a prototypical dirtbag. What is that?
Right. So whenever you watch the games, there's always that guy that has the dirty uniform.
Yeah.
And Taylor Walls used to be that kind of guy, and when he was in the Rays system, where every time you looked at him, it was just dirty, just all the time dirty. Whether it's because he's stealing bases, he's throwing himself on the ground, he's rolling around when he's making plays, always seems to have that extra dirt on him compared to everybody else. So, and it just means they seem to just enjoy the game with a little bit more shine than the rest of the guys.
I love it.
Yeah, I think it's a great skill to have. You want the guys to love the game and to be infectious. Who's a guy that I would say was like that? Dustin Pedroia would kind of fit that kind of name as well. Yeah, so he has speed to spare, is what I like to say. Like what I wrote up, the Rays system is just full of those guys, so you can't really say that's a full-time asset. But because his versatility is so important, when you're looking at that last guy on the bench, you want that guy that can cover the outfield and the infield if you can find it. And I think Hugh will be that kind of player. So if they're trying to add more seasoning for a guy, let's say Tanner Murray is not ready for the show yet, or Curtis Mead is still struggling, and they want to give a guy a shot on the bench, then Mac would be that kind of guy. More than likely, he gets plucked by another team in the same way that Miles Mastrobuoni got plucked.
Right.
And that's who I would compare him with the most in terms of playing ability and style. Not a power hitter at all, but he could surprise some people, here and there. 25 is a guy that I think a lot of people have forgotten about, and I really like what he's done since he was drafted. And he's a really young shortstop. Might be the second best defensive player in the Rays system after Carson Williams. So that's saying a lot. And when you're 18 years old and you steal 51 bases and you have that kind of defensive ability at the key position,
oh yeah,
more people should be paying attention to you. And I think that's what people miss with Adrian, is they're just looking at the overall package of, his weighted runs is under 100. He doesn't have a high average. He doesn't have a high OBP. He was 18 years old in A-ball and concentrating on trying to, get his bat going. So give him a season or two. I think that, the next level for him is definitely going to be A+, now that Carson's probably moving up to AAA and everybody else moves up, a level. But I really hope that at some point in time they can get him the work that he needs to improve that bat, because the rest of his tools are just so impressive that he could really be the prototypical helium prospect that all of a sudden everybody is just raving about. But Having said that, there's always the fear that the hit tool never develops. So there's that, hit and miss there. So I'm giving him a year basically this year to say, okay, well, what can you do? And we'll see how it goes at the end of the year. Joe Rock is next, and I know we talked about him last
Oh
year a
yeah.
few times. I he would be higher on the list if he could just get more swing and miss than he's had. I think he was working constantly last year, the entire season on trying to refine what was working, what wasn't, and it was just a lot of hit and miss in terms of what he wanted to do. By the end of the season, I think he got there. So I'm really curious to see how they use him and how quickly he can get a shot in the show. Like I say in the write-up, I think that there's a lot of similarities to how Mason Montgomery's development went. So don't be surprised if if there's an injury, there's something that happens, they end up using him in the relief role, and he has a similar kind of success as Mason had in that role because he just, to me, he has the tools there to actually impact the game in a really positive way. And I like the way that he throws the ball. Dominic Keegan is next on the list at 23. And for some people, that'll be a little bit too low. I just think that there's some fears there because if you're going to not have him behind the plate, which some people are saying he will be, some people are saying he's not. I'm not in the catcher and pitchers meetings. I don't know how he calls the game. I don't know what they like and don't like. So I can't presume to know one way or the other how great of a catcher he actually is. What I see is improvements in terms of blocking and pass balls. So that's great. That's something that you definitely want to see. And I know the arm strength is there. It's just the accuracy really isn't there for him to nab base stealers. And until that kind of hones in, then you can't really call him, a full-time catcher. And so there's a chance that he might end up, at first base a little bit or somewhere else, maybe left field. But I think that the bat will play. So nobody questions that. It's just, will it play enough for the position that he's auditioning for when he's up against Trey Morgan and Xavier Isaac?
Right. Jeez.
So, there's a lot of risk there. So that's why he's outside the top 20. I really like the player. I like the potential that he has. If he does stick behind the plate, I think that he could become a really key cog for the Rays if that were to be able to be, the way that it turns out. So I hope that my ranking is way too low. To the long story short. After that, we got Paul Gervasi, who's like, I don't even know if that's exactly how you say the name. I'm just putting it out there in that way. But he's the 6'10", Mark. Like, how many 6'10" pitchers do you see in system? It's just amazing the amount of tall guys that the Rays
More
have.
monsters from the mound, man. I tell
Oh,
you what.
yeah, I want to see a mound meeting between him and Kyle Snyder, and they're just looking eye to eye. And you're like, both those guys are 6'10". And then, Taylor Walls goes up and gets part of it, and he's like, a foot lower than both of them.
Oh gosh. Yeah, that would make for an interesting image.
Yeah, exactly. So Paul is a little bit different than the other guys that I mentioned before in that he has a little bit more seasoning than the other guys in terms of the innings pitched down in the minors or the outings, and he did it with the Mets. So it's hard to tell exactly how they're going to be able to continue refining his stuff. But I can tell you what he's shown so far with the Rays system, whatever they did worked. Because he was almost at 16 K per nine with a 1.5 walk per nine
Dang.
in a short period of time that they had him aboard. Like, he just rocked it. And I watched some of those outings, and I'm telling you right now that if the Rays are able to get that consistently from him, he will be in the pen before 2025 is done. And he will be a key piece of that pen. I really, really, really like his potential. I think if the consistency is there in terms of his delivery and the results, he has a chance to be the Rays version of Mason Miller. That's how much I like Paul Gervasi. Having said that, like I said, because it was such a short period of time with the Rays, you have to mitigate some excitement with some trepidation. So that's why he's not actually in the top 20. One of the guys they just acquired from the A's is Will Simpson, and everybody I talk to that follows their system
is telling me that he's only going to be a first baseman, but knowing the Rays system, there's no way that he can be a first baseman. So I'm stuck trying to see him as a left fielder. I'm told that he wouldn't be able to handle it very well, but we saw the Rays handle, Xavier Isaac and turn him into a viable potential left fielder. Will Simpson, the jury is out. Could be a first baseman, could be a left fielder. What I do know from talking to people is that they're very, very strong in his hit tool abilities. So it's not to say it's elite, but it's strong. It's above average. So the Rays really banked on the bat there when they went and acquired him. Not a lot of power for those positions overall in terms of home runs, but there is a lot of extra base power, which is also fine. The Rays are fine with those kinds of numbers. They don't necessarily have to be over the fence. I mean, we see Andy Diaz and his exit velocity. The Rays are fine if you're able to do it in other ways. But his weighted on base has been above 400 for a lot of time from
Wow.
2021 onwards. So you do have to open your eyes and say, okay, through that, that's great that he gets on base. His ISO has been anywhere from 200 to 300. So you're looking at, wow, okay, well, that's also consistent. And the K rate's been consistently below 25% through all that. So there's intrigue there with Will Simpson, and I'm giving him a lot of credit because of that, even though he wasn't really one of the top ranked players for the A's in their top 30. So I think there's more there to be seen than what's being advertised before. So that's the top 21 to 50. What are your thoughts, Mark?
I am amazed at the amount of talent that we're seeing in there. I'm glad to hear some strength with some catchers who actually got some pop to their bat as well. I like that. I'm excited. I'm looking here at some of these young folks, and who is that one young gentleman? Is it Nathan Fluellen? What a catcher. He's 18 now. Geez, when he's 6'1". It's going to be an exciting time, Matt.
Yeah, that's part of the fun of watching this. And once you actually dig in, you write these lists and you do the bit more homework and watch a little bit more of the games, it gets exciting year to year to see some of those guys have success and beat the odds.
Well, time and again, I mean, you over the last few years, you have said a name. I said, "Oh, okay. Well, I got to watch for that guy. It may be a year or two before I see him pop up on the screen of everybody else talking about him." And I was like, "Damn, that's right." Matt was saying that, and so I started really looking closely to anybody that you brought up on the show. And man, this is exciting. Some of the ones you've got here. I know I'm going to be digging deeper into the system, watching these folks come up.
Perfect segue into Cooper Kenny. Because he's a guy that actually has a lot more potential than he's shown so far. He was limited a little bit in playing time last year because of injuries. I think there's a lot to like about what Cooper does. He's always renowned to be a leader on the team. They look to him to actually, set the tone in a lot of ways. He's got a great approach at the plate, puts up good at bats. I think there's a lot of power in his bat that hasn't shown up in game to the level where it will once he actually gets more at bats and more playing time. So I think I'm really excited to see what he's able to do in Double A. I know that you can get there and you can struggle and you can have a half season or whatever that actually is an adjustment period. So what I'll be looking at for Cooper is in the second half of 2025, is he able to take off from that point onwards and actually be comfortable, assuming he does start the year in Double A. He may start in A+ for a little bit and then get the jump after the fact once he gets his legs under him. But I'm really excited. He's a first base, third base guy. You could say he's more of a second baseman, a little bit like Curtis Mead, but a much better defensive player. So those are the three positions you can envision him playing in Double A or in Triple A. I think that he's definitely going to be somebody that you hear a lot more about. A lot of people do like him already and have pointed out his skills, though, to be fair. So I don't think he's going to be exactly an unknown to anyone. Right above him, we have 19, Dylan Lesko. And I was so excited when they got him from the Padres because I know he's been languishing there a little bit and not showing his full potential. So, like I said before, with Paul Gravasi and what he's been able to do with the Rays once he made the jump from the Mets, I was hoping for the same thing from Dylan Lesko. Having said that, it hasn't shown up yet. There's still some zoning in to do. I know there's tinkering going on, and until you spend a whole off season and a whole training program and a whole spring training with an organization, you get a lot of leeway. So Dylan Lesko is still in the top 20 because I know the talent is there. He's a guy that misses a lot of bats with his stuff. The stuff is great. He just a lot of walks, Mark. A lot of walks
Ooh.
and really not trusting or not being able to repeat the delivery, whatever it is. He's not able to be zoned in, or maybe he just doesn't trust this stuff as much as he should. So I'm hoping the Rays and their great coaches can get him to be more aggressive in the zone. If he's able to do that, I think that we're going to see an explosion of talent from or results from Dylan in 2025. Colton Ledbetter is the next guy on the list at 18. And, sometimes the outfielders that don't have the shiny tools are the ones that get the playing time when they get to the show. And Johnny DeLuca is a good example of that, right?
Yep.
Where you don't get that whole, oh, wow, look at that, or wow, look at this. But they just do everything well. And Colton Ledbetter is a lot like that, where he has the speed to play any of the three positions. He has enough power that you want him in the lineup and without having to fear that he's not going to have any power. And he gives you strong at-bats every time that he's up there. And he's learning that craft of basically being a little bit more consistent at the plate. So all the way through the minors, he's always been one of those guys that you have to keep an eye on if you're the opposing pitcher and you're looking at the lineup. And he's always going to provide a lot of consistency to it. So now he's done that all the way up to the A+ level. The question is, what happens at the AA level? So far, the hit tool is looking volatile a little bit, where you could be leaning more towards the Garrett Whitley side, or it could be going a little bit higher going forward. So there's a lot to watch basically in 2025 to see how he responds to the jump to AA. So I'm really curious to see what he does there. It's hard to say how it'll turn out, but I'm keeping a good eye on it because the tools are there across the board. Everything is average or better, that you could see him being a really solid outfielder when he gets to the show. Mason Montgomery. So that was an eye-opener last year, Mark. Yeah, Yeah, you watched him pitch for the Rays, right?
Yes, indeed. I was glad to see him come up with it too. I mean, he'd been with us since about 2021 or no 2022. I'm looking here at what you posted, and been all the way from single A, double A, triple A, and then finally made it to the show last year. So that was interesting to watch him come up.
If you open up the stats and you look at the 2023 season, I think you'll see that a lot of people had given up on him as a high-end prospect. And a lot of the reason was because in 2023, he had a 6.09 ERA, FIP, once he got up to AAA. That, to me, is always a big red alert kind of thing when you're looking at it, because although the ERA was 2.7, the FIP being 6.09 tells you, well, there's a lot of reasons why it was kept low, and it wasn't really his pitching. It's more of the fielders or the situation or where the ball was hit. So I think a lot of people were holding their breath to see how it was going to turn out. So when they saw what happened in 2024 to start the season, then all of a sudden people started saying, well, yeah, we were right? And so you get the 5.39 FIP and then the 6.26 ERA. You're like, they're not going to call him up. Little did they know that eventually the Rays, turned the page on his starting and they made him a reliever. So as soon as that happened, it took off. And this is the argument I think I made with you earlier in the offseason, where the Rays have to do that a little bit more quickly with some of their pitching talents, because the potential is there. And I think a lot of them would have a lot more success if they made that change a lot sooner. And he was just amazing in terms of the amount of swing and miss he was able to get once he turned to relief only. So I'm really excited to see what he can do in the Rays pen this year. They made some room for him by getting Colin Posh, not bringing him back. So we're going to see what he can do. And I think there's a lot of potential there to be a really, a steady left-handed reliever that puts out a lot of fires all season long. So it's great to see Mason have success and all that work not go to waste. After him, there's one guy that everybody is really, really, really stoked about the season he had. Because when you draft a high school pitcher, you never really know which way it's going to go. You're hoping, and you look at the tools, and you're crossing your fingers, but you're always saying, okay, well, is he going to be able to rise up to the pressure? Because they do feel pressure. They're giving up a college education, or they're going pro right away. So they're putting all the chips on the table on their talents to actually pursue their professional career as a pitcher. So with Gary Gill, the consistency he showed for a guy as young as he is, regardless of what situation he was in, the mound presence, the movement on the pitches that he had, how much better those pitches got, everything across the board just got better and better all season long and became more and more exciting. So he's a guy that I think in the Rays system has a lot of helium because every evaluator, all the outlets are talking about Gary Gill with a very, very excited tone. Whether or not he can follow it up with another season like that, we'll see how it goes. But here's what I did is I actually took out the last start because his last start of the season, he was running out of gas. He gave up 6 runs. It wasn't really reflective of what he did the entire season.
Gotcha.
When you cut that out, you get 104 innings pitched with as a 19-year-old with 104 strikeouts. So a strikeout per inning and a 2.75 ERA. So the walk rate was very manageable, wasn't very high, consistent across the board. And by the end of it, you look at a few of his last starts before he gave up a few runs in the end. I mean, you're talking about a 7-inning start where he gave up 1 run and struck out 7. Another one is 6 innings shutout with 7 strikeouts. He's one of those guys where you're leaning towards the starting role because of the excitement with how many bats he's able to miss and how consistently he is pitching. But some people are saying he would be even better if he were a reliever and they see him in a closing role down the road. I think when Baseball America projects their, what would the Rays be in 2028? They had him in the closer role as an example. So I don't know. I'm hoping that that's not the case. I'm hoping he'll stick with the starter's role. The frame, I think, is what gets a lot of people, and he's a little bit skinny and a little bit, scrawny for his age. So they don't see the stamina holding up over time. But like I said, the number of innings pitched, if he's able to push that up to 130, 140 this coming year and show consistency, I think he'll put that to rest and he'll actually be known as a starting pitching prospect instead of just one or the other.
I'm glad to see a young man progressing so well.
Yeah, that's great. It's outstanding. At number 15, we got Ty Johnson. Ty Johnson's got, a 60 grade fastball and a 60 grade slider. So right away, you're like, okay, he's going to pitch an MLB at some point in time. The question is more, what kind of role is he going to have and what kind of success? So he struck out 120 guys in 84 innings over his last 13 starts. I mean, the writing's on the wall with that. He's ready for Double-A. I think that he's one of the guys that the Rays are really excited about, bringing aboard and having the ability to tinker with him and see whether or not they can actually develop him as a starter. But right away, if they ever, decide to go full tilt on the reliever side, he's one of the guys that you could see having a lot of success as a reliever. I think ultimately he's going to be more of a third to fourth guy in a rotation. The question is, how many innings is he able to put under his belt? Does he stay healthy? And how does he handle the switch up to Double-A? So we'll see. I'm really excited to see what he does next year. Great arm. Santiago Suarez is right ahead of him at number 14. A young guy, a lot of excitement last year for him. I think that the disappointment was more that he didn't step up a level some point in the season. But if you were to ask me who was the most consistent starter in A-ball for the Rays from the beginning of the season to the end of the season, Santiago Suarez would be it. So the Rays allowed him to get a really strong foundation at that one level. so that next year when he goes up to Bowling Green, he's actually able to handle it a lot better than he would have otherwise. He did have some starts where he was up and down for a little tiny stretch. I think that was more of a tinkering with the repertoire, which is what you can do at the lower levels when you're trying to get a pitcher to have the best tools to miss more bats as they go up to the higher levels. So I think that had a lot to do with it, but his walks per nine, I mean, Mark, they're always consistently right around the 1.7 per nine. So that's a really solid result for a guy that's only 19 years old to this point.
That ain't bad, McGee.
No, not at all. So you're looking at it and you're going, okay, well, he threw 111 innings at A-ball level. So really he's shown a lot already just by making that that work with a 2.99 xFIP. So that's the expected fielder independent, which is really solid. Like you're expecting a little bit better than the 4.11 ERA that he actually had as a result. Is basically the case. So he'll be one of the key cogs in the Bowling Green rotation next year. I think that he's going to be someone that you want to see a higher K rate from next year. So something above 10 would really get people excited and get him on a better footing basically going forward. So yeah, Santiago Suarez is very, very intriguing. He's a guy that everybody's keeping an eye on. Homer Bush Jr. is next. He's another guy that the Rays got from the Padres. Another speedster. You know, you have certain guys that have certain moxie to their game and certain flair, I guess is the best way to put it. And Homer Bush Jr. has that. And he's just one of the guys that just electrifies the game when he's on the field. K percentage is below 20%. He's got a strong approach at the plate. I think the Rays are going to allow him to swing a little bit more freely so that he can get a little bit more power out of his bat. We'll see how that plays out in terms of the K percentage, whether or not it goes up with them or not. It did a little bit last year through 121 plate appearances, but that's a small sample size. We don't want to jump to conclusions. But with that approach, he was able to get to about 125 weighted runs created. So that's not a bad result for a guy that shows a lot of speed. He stole 57 bases last year. So you're talking what? Adrian Santana had 51. This guy had 57. You had another couple that were in the 40s. You had, a guy that we'll mention soon that had a lot as well. So speed is not lacking. So I think you'll see Homer Bush Jr. at some point in AAA next year if he has a lot of success in AA, which is where he'll probably begin the season, take over the role for Chandler Simpson. Number 12, Jackson Bouwmeester, a guy that they got from the Orioles. And I think he was the main piece, in my opinion, in the package that they got back from the Orioles. Yeah, Matt Horvath is great. And the Etzel is great in terms of an outfield talent. But the focus to me was definitely on Bouwmeester because he's the guy that will actually be able to push some of the Rays pitching talents as he chases down one of the rotation spots. I think that he's one of the guys that can actually miss a lot more bats than people give him credit for whatever reason. I think that there's a good chance that some outlets rank him in the top 10 for the Rays prospects this year. I think that he's going to open up a lot of eyes as he gets to Durham. And as soon as the Rays get a hold of his repertoire, I just think he's going to be a pleasure to watch. I'm expecting big things from him. I really, really believe that he'll be in the top 10 by the end of the season, and that we might even see him maybe in the top 5 to 7 in most cases. But he'll be ready to be a backup plan in 2026 for the Rays. They have so much talent right now that it's hard to see him get a shot in 2025, but definitely keep a good eye on him because he's a lot of fun to watch.
Well, he's still a young man, too, at 22.
Yeah, he is. Yeah. But, I mean, we've seen the Rays do that before. Like, Shane Baz was pretty young when he made his first start with the Rays. Shane McClanahan was about the same age. So they're not shy about the age factor. It's more a matter of whether or not the job opens up. And I'm hoping I'm right, but I think the Rays are in a healthy place right now with some of the guys returning, and I'm hoping that they have a little bit more luck when it comes to guys actually not falling off the map through the season. Oh, Mark, I can't deal with the number of guys on IL that they've lived through
Oh,
over the last 3 years. That's just crazy.
jeez, it's nuts. It's nuts. I mean, we all know about the whole pitching thing last year. That's why when you've been talking about pitching on the show previous weeks and looking at who's coming back this year, I can finally smile. But at the same time, Matt, I know what's it look like by the end of the year. Everybody's roster can be looking fantastic or it can look pretty sad. So I'm looking forward to seeing this strong team we're starting out with for the Rays. But looking at what we have as far as opportunities here just is amazing to me. What we can see coming up, and if any unfortunate things turn for the Rays.
Right. So just like Jackson Bomeister was the key piece, in my opinion, when the Rays made the trade with the Orioles, I think the key piece when they made the trade with the Mariners was split, which is kind of odd to say. But there was two pieces that were equally important in the trade. I think they were the main reason the Rays made the trade, and one of those pieces was Aiden Smith. And I had him in my top 10 for the majority of the time I was building this list. He just slid a little bit outside at number of 11, but he's a very, very, very intriguing outfield talent. We spoke about, I think the last time you and I were talking, and I was talking about the Rays need those guys that are going to stand out and actually become top 10, top 15, in the league at their position, or even be the best at their position. So when I look at Aiden Smith, I see a lot of potential to be somebody like a Kyle Tucker. That's a little bit more of a late bloomer. It's a little bit more of a power not really showing up until he actually fully develops. But man, that guy can get on base. His at bats are just outstanding. I think that the tools that he has, the package across the board, you could say are very, very, very high, to the point where you're just tinkering with whether or not they're 55 or 60. And that says a lot, because when you have that kind of tool package, if you get in the right organization at the right time,
Yep.
and you get the playing time that you need, I think that there's a lot of promise there that the Rays will actually benefit from down the road. So I think he'll end up in the top 100 at some point, whether or not it's this year or next. I just saw enough last year where it got me really excited about his tool package. And I think that the Rays haven't had this many high level outfield talents all at once. And the next guy on the list in the top 10, we're entering the top 10, Theo Gillen. If he hadn't been hurt, he's had some knee issues. If he hadn't been hurt as much as he had been, would have been, maybe top 6 or 7 drafted in this draft. The Rays were able to get him a lot, further out because of the injury risk. But he's a guy that the hit tool just shines. He's one of the best bat to ball skills guys of the draft. So the Rays are banking on a long development, but one that's very, very fruitful. And he's going to anchor the outfield probably in A-ball next year. And I'm really, really interested to see what he can do there. There's a lot of, we talk, I know I say it a lot too. When you talk about the makeup of a player, right? It's just about what you've heard other people say. It's not because I've had the conversations with them. But there isn't one executive when they were doing the draft, that after the Rays made their pick, that didn't go out of their way to mention this about Theo and really praise that part of him. So I think in that case, it's one of those things to look for as he comes up. Does that continue? Do you keep hearing that over and over and over again? So something to watch for with Theo. He'll be able to play all 3 outfield spots. I think if he does have knee issues, over time, it may be best for him to shift over to right field or left field. But we'll see how it goes. And just a great talent overall, and somebody to keep an eye on. Ian Seymour's left-handed pitcher. I don't know why he didn't get more love last year. I look at this guy, and he's just so much fun to watch. There's guys like Carlos Perez I used to watch with the Expos that are just so animated on the mound, and you're just like, man, I just want to keep watching the game because it's just so intense. And intense is how I would describe Ian Seymour. He has a job to do. He's on the mound to do it, and he's going to do it, and he's going to prowl around the mound as he does it. So the last 10 starts that he made with the Bulls were great. 54 innings pitched, 63 strikeouts. He was able to get, the strongest starts of his season were at the end of the season. And I think that's really telling because the year before, Ian had gone through some injuries. And so he was really building strength through the 24 season and was at his peak when the season ended. So I think you're going to see him really take off when the season starts this year. And I wouldn't be surprised to see him being one of the first call-ups that they use in season if once they need one. So really excited about what he has. Really great deception. He gets a lot of guys to miss-hit balls and get awkward hits and awkward swings. So I think he's a really great arm for them to have as a backup. And I think that's part of why they were able to trade Jeffrey Springs away.
Right. Because I know I was like, I saw Jeffrey Springs' name being traded. I was like, what? But when you see something like what Ian Seymour has done here, it gives a little bit more hope because I always trust Neander, okay? but yeah, and when Jeffrey Springs was gone, but you're like with after what you've told me everything here about Ian Seymour, I certainly feel better about what we got in the trade.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel very secure about it. And the Rays aren't afraid to use pen days if needed as well. So
There you go.
yeah. Braylor Guerrero is next on the list at number 8. Now, when the season started, I started just, really zoning in on him because of what he was doing. Unfortunately, he got hurt. So it really threw a little bit of water on the fire. But he was on his way to having a great season to the point where you're like, whoa, okay, now we've got another phenom style player on the team that are in a system that we need to monitor really closely. So his weighted on base through 126 plate appearances last year was 450. When you're talking a guy that's 18 years old, even though it's rookie ball, it's still impressive because it was his first time playing on U.S. soil out of the DSL, and he had 155 weighted runs created. So because of the guys that I mentioned before in terms of Theo Gillen and the more seasoned players that they got out of the draft, it's hard to say whether or not he'll start in A ball or again in the FSL next year. I think that even if he starts in the FSL, if he has this kind of success right away again, I think they'll make the jump to A ball very quickly. His defensive abilities in right field are outstanding. His arm is great. So I think that they'll probably want to test that as well all the way through the system, is to sit him in right field and see if he can grow in to be an anchor in right field all the way through. So yeah, great talent, solid speed for now. Probably will slow down a little bit as he gets older, but great contact. His hit tool is one of the better ones in the system, especially in the lower parts. Brody Hopkins is the other half of what I was talking about before with the Rays. And I think that he's one of the guys that you want to get really excited about. The pitching, I always liked Dylan Lesko just because I've owned him in so many fantasy leagues. But Brody Hopkins is a guy that I've grown to monitor a little bit more closely because he has just that innate ability of pretty much what all the Mariners prospects have, really, is that innate ability to miss bats and to make guys look stupid when they do miss. So, he's a lot of fun to watch because of that. He lowered his whip when he made the jump from the Mariners over to the Rays, and that's why I'm giving him a little bit more credit, a little bit like Paul Gravasi, where I think that they had a way to improve some of his stuff, and some of it was working higher in the zone. So it'll be interesting to see if that continues next year. They brought down the ground ball rate significantly, but it was also more effective. So we'll see how it plays out. It was a very, very tiny sample. Now he's going to get to go in an offseason, a complete offseason with the Rays, and see how much more refining he can do to his set of tools. And Mark, his floor is extremely high. There's not many guys that you would give a 70 grade fastball to that are starting, right? So he's one of them. And I think that most people would agree that his slider has 60 grade potential. So the question really for him is whether or not the Rays are able to get enough out of the cutter and the changeup to make the rest of his repertoire stick for him to remain a starter. I think
Right.
that he'll get every chance to do that. Hard to say whether or not he starts in A plus or double A this year. Like I said, there's a lot of competition in the Rays system, but the floor for him is extremely high, and the ceiling is equally extremely high.
Mhm.
I think that there's a good chance that he ends up being a top three in a rotation when he gets to the show. Braden Taylor. Now we're getting into the top six, Mark, and all of these guys that I'm going to mention from here up are guys that could impact the 2025 season. Can you remember a time as a Rays fan that ever happened where the top six prospects were feasibly able to arrive in a single season?
I have not been a Rays fan as long as you might think. I mean, that's the moment was it? It'd probably be during the Madden era, wouldn't it?
Yeah, well, I don't think it's ever happened, to be quite honest.
Okay.
And most teams probably wouldn't do that in one season.
Yeah, I
But
couldn't imagine. Well,
the Rays are weird like that. I think they will because of the commitment they made to that in the offseason. Or sorry, in mid-season last year. So when they decided to pull the plug on the season basically and say, okay, we're trading a bunch of guys, we're going to bring in talent, and we're just shifting gears a little bit. Not a reset, not a 5 year, not even a 1 year. They're basically saying, okay, we just want to load up with talent and have more people arrive at the same time. To me, that committed to that kind of thing. And that's why we haven't seen them be aggressive this offseason, bringing in more talent because they are loaded. And I think they want to get them the playing time. And it's just the breadth of guys that they have that are so high end in terms of their tools at various positions and key positions for the guys that they have on board right now that it makes it a very interesting potential outcome. So it starts with Braden Taylor, who's a utility player with the Rays. His best position is probably second base. We know that they have Brandon Lau. Brandon Lau, as we all know, has a lot of back issues. He's played some first base. He's DH'd some. He really shines as a DH. Like, honestly,
oh yeah.
probably one of the best DHs the Rays have had in the last few years. So you can make a case that Braden Taylor could steal that second base spot from Curtis Mead, from Richie Palacios, from Jose Caballero, or other guys if he's able to perform extremely well in AAA when he gets there this year. So that's the big thing with Braden Taylor is what is he going to do when he gets to AAA? I don't know if he'll start the season there. There's enough risk in terms of his strikeout rates that they probably want him to repeat AA for a portion of the season. So it'll depend a lot on that. Previous to his AA time, he was always a high on base percentage guy, always a high hit tool guy, not a 300 average guy, but a guy that hits enough and has enough speed to get in field hits and to get some of the extra base hits that you want from the guys in the lineup. So always had solid power. And honestly, when you look at his power numbers, there's a lot of similarities to Brandon Lau.
Mm.
Which is really intriguing. And it really in all of his numbers. All of his numbers you could replicate next to Brandon Lau's and be like, wow, okay, well, this is weird. This is eerily similar to what I looked at before. So even though I think he'll be a utility guy for the most part, when you're looking at the makeup of the Rays, he's a guy that has the ability to move around. And there aren't many guys that I would call Ben Zobrist like, but he is one.
Yep.
Just because I think that it'll be demanded from him. And I think that his abilities body wise is able to do it at a high level. And I think that was the unique thing with Ben Zobrist. It's not really that that he could stand there at every position. He actually played every position well. Braden can do the same thing. And I don't think it'll impact his bat. It remains to be seen, obviously, but I think he'll be able to hold up the bat as he's doing that. And that's what makes him a Ben Zobrist-like player. Ahead of him is my favorite pitching prospect in the Rays system, which is Yoniel Curet. He's one of the guys that, you try to never speak the words. It reminds me of Pedro Martinez.
Ooh, I like. Okay, so you're going to say Zobrist and and Pedro Martinez within the same minute? Come on, man.
I would never do that. I would never do that on that, especially to the kid, right? I don't want to put that kind of stuff on him. But no, I think the Rays put him on the 40-man early for very, very good reason. The tools are very, very loud. I think he'll actually be better than even we expect him to be once he fully develops. And I think he has a 1 or 2 potential as a ceiling if he puts it all together. Having said that, a lot of people still see a lot of risk with the walk rates. They've started to come down as he's getting up to the higher levels. So that's why I'm very excited about him. It's that, the batting average is staying low in terms of people actually going up to the plate and having success against them. The walk rate is going down and the K rate is staying high or even improving as he's getting up to AA. So he'll start probably in AA. I would say, maybe a half dozen starts. If they are anywhere near what he did when he first got there last year, I think you're going to see him move up to AAA very quickly. And I think that the Rays will be very excited about bringing him into the show at some point. He's that kind of talent where nothing phases him on the mound. He gets a good amount of missed hits. The guys can't see the ball very well from him. They're always taking weird swings when he's on the mound. So I think it's nice to know that the Rays have that coming. It's sort of comforting, right? It's a bit more of a polished talent than what a Brody Hopkins would be, or what a Dylan Lesko would be, or some of the other guys that I mentioned, even though he's still very, very, very young. He's only 22. Right ahead of him is Trey Morgan.
Oh, yeah.
What a lot of people, there's consensus that he's the best defensive first baseman in the minors. I don't know if that's true or not. He went to the AFL last year and actually played some outfield as well. He's shown a little bit of what he can do out there. I don't think they have any plans of putting him out in left field unless something were to happen where Xavier Isaac demanded or had to play first base because he had an injury or something like that. But Trey Morgan is stellar as a first baseman. He should be their first baseman of the future. His weighted runs created has always been extremely high, well above average. He showed he could handle the AFL pitching with ease. Every at-bat he puts up, he's pesky. Reminds me a lot of Carlos Santana, if that makes sense, where, you'll have a high walk rate, a low K rate, really high average, and he'll get on base. But I don't know if the hit tool is going to outshine Carlos Santana, which is kind of, intriguing in itself. Can he maintain that 300 average and above that he's done so far all the way through, A+? Can he do that at the upper levels? First little bit in AA, it was a little bit lower, but like I said before, there's an adjustment period. So for Trey Morgan, probably starts in AA next year. And if he shines early on, he'll probably get pushed up to AAA, and then he'll be ready to be called up probably in 2026. So that's Trey Morgan. At number 3, the big trio, Xavier Isaac is the first guy that I think we all went, oh, the Rays are drafting differently now. Because they banked on the power. And there aren't many guys that get 80 grade power in the minors. They're very hesitant to throw that around, and he gets it. Because when you see him hit a home run, it's not just going a little bit over the fence. It's going beyond and well beyond and well beyond. and it's extremely exciting for the Rays to have that, because I've been waiting for them to have a top outfield talent, I think, where you're like, okay, that guy, not defensively, I'm talking offensively, that you can say, okay, they're going to have this guy for 6-7 years and he's going to just mash. that's an extremely rare thing in a Rays system. They've been very successful at other things, but that hasn't been one of them. So for him to be able to bring that to the Rays at any point in time in the near future is extremely exciting. He has to work on his K rates. They're a little bit high. So I think that there's a lot of youth and a lot of power, focused development that is included in that. So I don't think it's scaring the Rays at all. I think it's actually a good thing that you're also seeing the steadiness of the walk rates. So all the way through from A ball all the way through to double A so far, it's been right there at 14 to 15%. What that's telling me is pitchers are afraid to pitch to him in a lot of cases, and there's a lot more room to grow when it comes to on-base abilities and hit tool abilities. So you look at the weighted weighted on base average at the same time, and you're all the way up to 396, and then it only dipped to 334 when he got to double A as a 20-year-old. So the on-base percentage itself was still about 350. So you're like, okay, well, that's manageable. That's a solid first attempt at double A as a 20-year-old for your 130 at-bats. So I'm really excited for Xavier. I think he's going to have a bright future with the Rays. I think that it's been a long time since we've had a power pitcher for the power hitter for them that will anchor the lineup in the same way that a David Ortiz would. So I have an inkling that you'll see him in AAA and in Durham very quickly if he comes out firing in 2025. The next guy on my list is Chandler Simpson. And the reason why he's at 2 and Xavier is at 3 is the hit tool. So Xavier has a very intriguing power package, but as we've seen with a lot of prospects through the majors, power tends to go, it tends to come, it tends to, depending on how the player develops the rest of the tools, there's risk there. So basically with Chandler Simpson, there is no risk. The hit tool is there. We know what you're going to get out of him when he goes to the plate, which is a very, very pesky, steady approach. The pitchers are going to hate pitching to him. He's going to get on base. He's going to drive them nuts. He's going to get on the base and steal a lot of bases and turns a lot of those singles and walks into triples. and he's just going to be an electric guy. I don't think the Rays have had an electric guy of this sort since Carl Crawford. I think that he's very, very, very exciting to know that he's coming, basically, because when Yandy Diaz is in the phase of his career that he is, at some point you're going to have to replace him at the top of the lineup, and that Chandler Simpson is that guy. He's going to be able to anchor the top of the lineup with great at-bats and set the tone for the rest of the lineup. And that's just great. Like his average, when you're looking at it, is ridiculous. In A-ball, he did dip down to 285, but ever since then, it was 326, 293, 364, 351, 355. The last three that I mentioned there, an A plus and then double A, I mean, that's just, it's ridiculous, really. The Rays are lucky to have him. He stole 104 bases last year. And I don't think he gets enough love still. I don't understand why he's not in most people's top 100 prospects. Because I look at everything that he does and I'm amazed that they don't give the same amount of credit to the hit tool as they probably should. And top of the heap, Mark, we're at the top.
Woohoo, man. And finally, I've been waiting to see this man's name rise. We've been talking about him all year and last year. So, and not surprised to see you had this man here. So go ahead, man. But number one.
Number one is Carson Williams. He's 21 years old. He's their future captain. That's the way that I phrased it in the write-up. And he's just elite defender. They did a poll with all the executives in MLB and all their scouting and asked who are the top talents defensively in the minors, and he was at the top of the heap by more than 40% of them. So that says a lot about what the Rays are going to get when he arrives. The question is, when is he going to arrive?
Yep.
So defensively, we know he's MLB ready. You're talking about a guy with both power and speed. So 20, 20, and 23. So 23 home runs and 20 stolen bases. Last year, he put up 20 home runs and 33 stolen bases. He also was able to bring his K rate down a little bit last year in Double-A. So he's under 30% now while maintaining his power. So his power is still above 200 in terms of the ISO. So in my opinion, there is no need for him to go to AAA. I think that he can get that seasoning in the majors. The Rays aren't expecting to win the World Series. I think that he has the makeup to handle it. I think that he has the kind of package that you want from your starting shortstop. There is no need for us to go through 1, 2, 3, 4 months of Taylor Walls at shortstop.
Thank you.
I want to see Carson Williams starting shortstop for the Rays opening day. And I want him to be the new focus of the position. You can hit him ninth. Hit him ninth for the first 2 months and see how it goes. I just think that throwing him in AAA at this point would just be doing a disservice to the season overall to the Rays, because I don't think they're going to get much more out of anybody else than they would get from him. So I say go for it. Go for the rookie that could actually get you that extra pick. Go for the development more than anything else for a guy that has the makeup to handle it in Carson Williams. The Rays fans deserve to have a replacement that's permanent for Wander Franco. So that's the alternative, is that the Rays may be skittish a little bit to put that much pressure on him right away. We also know about the years of control. So is there a potential that the Rays look at Carson Williams and say, you know what, do you want to sign an extension? Do you want to do like they've done it before with Brandon Lau, for example, where they did that 6-year extension where he gets a bonus, he gets set increases, and they buys out the majority of his arbitration years. They could look at something like that. It doesn't have to be as aggressive as they did with Wander Franco with the 13-year.
No.
But then that would mitigate the whole control time issue, right? Where they would want to bring him in only in June or July or whatever they want to set that date at. So I'm hoping we see Carson Williams extremely early. And in my opinion, earlier the better in 2025. And that's the list.
That's the list. And quite impressive. Thank you, Matt, for, again, diving deep into the entire system of the Rays and preparing this list of the top 50 prospects for Tampa Bay Rays. And like I said, some of these names I knew I was going to see here. Certainly Xavier Isaac, Trey Morgan, your top 10. Most of those names I already knew. But you showed some hope, even early on about some of these younger pitchers in the 50s. In the 40s. So I'm looking forward to continuing to track some of these people. And I want to thank you again for sharing that with all of us, brother.
It's always a pleasure, Mark. And thank you for giving me the airtime to do it. That's a lot of talking. That's a lot of words.
That's a lot of fun, too. Well, thank you again for joining us here today. And we look forward to talking with you again real soon.
Just a reminder, you can find Matt at matgermain.bsky social. That's at mattgermain.bsky.social or Mark at baseballbizondeck.bsky.social. You may also find Baseball Biz on Deck on iHeart, Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, and at baseballbizondeck.com. Special thanks to XTakeRUX for the music. Rocking forward.